Hello, this is Dr. Joel Goodin with what I'm calling the pathway to graduate school. Many of you are thinking about graduate school as an option. Many of you, hopefully, if you're thinking about that, you have an undergraduate degree. And many of you that I'm sort of focusing on in this video are behavioral science or psychology majors. Specifically, this video was a result of talking to people about counseling, doing and providing therapy as a possible career goal for using your undergraduate degree. Of course, with a bachelor's in psychology, there are not many things you can do. That is step one for you to understand. There's not a lot you can do with what you have if you've got that bachelor's in psychology. You might be able to work for Department of Human Resources somewhere. You might be able to be a psych tech. You might be you might get a job as a mental health paraprofessional, things like that. I'm guessing you'll cap out around 28 to 35,000 per year, which is not horrible, but that is that's being a little hopeful. You're going to do a lot of hard work, and it's going to be different than perhaps what you envision, which would be perhaps sitting with a client and providing therapy. You will not get to do that with a bachelor's. Not legally, not with licensure. You would maybe need to do that through a church or some sort of volunteer organization, but it would not be official. So let's take a look at where do we begin. Most of you will major in psychology, behavioral science, possibly sociology. My personal feeling on sociology, and I do not claim in this video to be the authority on this, but I do not feel sociology is the best match for any counseling or any therapy. I don't think it helps prepare that sufficiently or as well. I think it is not even best for social work unless you plan to provide social work that is not therapy. In other words, not clinical social work. It's more the social work that helps provide services, help match people up to the things they need. Major matters. That was cute, right? But it does matter. Schools are going to look at what you majored in to some degree, and of course, the more courses you have that align with what they want to teach you, the better. Of course, you'll want to go in with humility, with a willingness to learn. It's all about that attitude, and really saying that you want to learn what you don't yet know. Many of us are under the delusion, the false assumption that going in and saying, I'm really good at this already, is what they want to hear. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that maybe you have some raw skills that can be tailored, that can be sculpted, and you need them. You need them to help you sculpt those raw skills. The major shows what you were interested in, that you were gunning for this ultimate goal the whole time. You didn't major in basket weaving or art, or maybe you did, but what you want to do is show a consistency towards heading towards a specific major, and in grad school heading towards that degree in grad school and that ultimate career that the grad school will help you reach. So other considerations, as we think about your major, and put that away, let's think about, let me see what I have next. You might consider options. You don't want to choose something too soon, but you also want to show that consistency towards a specific goal, so that you do not look like a candidate for grad school that is unsure, that might drop out. Now, I want to ruin your dreams for a minute, just a little bit. One view that many people are seeing about master's programs is that they may not care. And what I mean by that is that there will be master's programs that are likely to let you in so they can have your money. Not because you have the right major, not because your GPA is high enough. These are the other considerations, of course. GPA, volunteer work, any experience in the field, letters of recommendation are going to be huge, guys. Now there will be some schools this should matter to, of course. This should matter, but some schools use their master's programs as a way to help the university make money. They make a lot of money off of master's students. It's a quick in and out 2-year program normally, and unfortunately, especially with counseling, we get a lot of people into counseling programs and out of counseling programs providing therapy, and perhaps they should not have been given that opportunity. Perhaps we should have done a little more consideration of who they are and whether we want to promote them into this field. Other considerations for getting into grad school, of course, you want that GPA, you want the GRE scores to be high, but you don't want to take the GRE too many times. You want to think about what you love. You may want to think about whether you can mix a major and a minor, or 2 majors. But you always want to be planning your undergrad so that it serves the purposes later in life. Now, after the bachelor's, we have some options. You can take a break. A lot of you, this sounds good. I did this. I took 3 years, and I could not find a job in psychology at first. In anything having to do with psychology. I worked at Applebee's, and I was not good at that. I don't know why. I'm a people person, but I just did not like it. And I worked at Best Buy, and I was good at selling stuff. And I worked at a bank, and I was good at that. And I finally became a mental health paraprofessional, and I said, you know what? Restraining and secluding kids and being a glorified bouncer of children is not what I want to do with my life or my brain. And it's good to know what you have if you have a brain that you want to use. If you have skills that you believe could really help people, you may want to use them in a different way. You may want to go to grad school. Grad school is not a miracle machine. It does not make you from a bad person who doesn't love people into a good person that cares about people and wants to help them. It simply gives you skills, some training, and ultimately a diploma, a degree. That degree is worth something, of course. So the question is, to get real-world experience, yes, if you can't get into grad school, I'm definitely going to need that real-world experience. Real-world experience is good. Some of you need to think about whether you're going to lose your momentum by taking a break from undergrad and not going straight into grad school? Are you going to lose your momentum? You will forget to some degree how to study, how to work hard, that routine that you're used to in school. Going straight into graduate school does have its perks. You stay in that routine, in that groove, so to speak. And one thing to consider with graduate school is this second bullet, in-state versus out-of-state. In other words, you got to think about where you want to go. I wanted to go somewhere sunny because I have some seasonal affective disorder sort of stuff. I'm really affected by the rain, otherwise I'd live in Seattle, right? So when we think about in-state versus out-of-state, we're not just picking a place, though. We're not picking sunny Florida or Hawaii or, you know, pick one out of a bag, pick my favorite state. We need to think about this. You need to realize that in-state is almost always going to cost less than out-of-state. It is tuition, just like undergrad. It is going to probably be a higher cost tuition because you're a grad student, and paying that out-of-state tuition is going to cost maybe 150% or 200% of what in-state tuition would cost. One thing I was able to look into was sort of an agreement between states, the Southern Association, where a state that I lived in did not offer a specific program, but it had a relationship with another state that did offer that program. And by using this relationship between the states, an agreement that they had where they shared student options, I was able to say this program in this other state offers a program that I could not get. I had to make a case for how it was special and different, and they allowed me to get in-state tuition in the other state. Okay, that was extremely helpful. Paying out-of-state tuition is going to cost a lot. You need to plan for that. Many states are on the lookout even for those people. And by the way, you want to see if this is an option for you. And speaking of taking possibly a year off, this would be one reason to do it. Move to a state, establish yourself, get a job, work, establish in-state residency, and then you get to pay in-state tuition. But many schools and states are sort of paying attention to that and will be sort of hesitant. Some will have some sort of blockages to allowing you to do that if they think you moved there and have set up this residence just so you can get the cheaper tuition. They will try to get you to pay the out-of-state tuition. Side note here that online school, not that I'm going to push that, I definitely don't. I think you'll get, especially in counseling, I think face-to-face is essential. But I will say out-of-state tuition is not normally an issue when we talk about distance learning. You need to realize that you're probably going to pay the same distance learning if you live in the state or out of the state. That is something just to keep in mind. Now, a final thing we're going to talk about is master's versus PhD. Which do you want to do? Well, it really matters on what you want to do, the career that you want to choose, the level of prestige, your life circumstances. We're going to look into these things. First, we're going to look at, on this topic, we're going to look at counseling versus research. Now, if you've got a degree in psychology, many of you have not realized, for some reason, I hadn't, I don't think, realized that a lot of people, I don't know the percentage, but a lot of people that get a degree in psychology or behavioral sciences, and especially sociology, will go into research. That you will not actually be providing psychological services in the form of therapy. you will be studying psychological phenomena, and you will be doing research on them. This is where a lot of the jobs and opportunities are in the psychological fields. Now, for those of you who do not wish to do research, to read articles, to read books, to write papers, to publish or perish, perhaps, for those of you that want to be more actively engaged in one-on-one or group counseling, you are going to be, of course, wanting to look for something that says counseling therapy. And we do have options here. There are many different types of counseling. Let's think about them. There are many different types of research as well. Our options here are really, and I am not going to cover all of them, but mental health counseling is one of the biggest master's options. They may call it something else that's similar, but it's mental health counseling. This means you will become a counselor. In some states, it ends with certification of LMHC, Licensed Mental Health Counselor, or LPC, Licensed Professional Counselor. It differs by state. So there's licensure and certification that you will need to get. Now, you can become that type of counselor and provide therapy that way. You can also become a clinical social worker with a master's. You would be something like an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, and you could pretty much do the same thing. What you want to realize is, think about where you want to live, where you want to practice your art of therapy, and what is popular in that state. Is it a place or a location, even within the state, where social work is really popular? People go to social workers for therapy, or do they go to counselors, or do they go to licensed psychologists? You need to know these sorts of things so that you can plan your approach, so that you will get the clients you need to pay your for your living. So main things we're going to look at are social work, counseling, as in mental health counseling, and then of course you could get a master's in psychology, but you will be limited. You can be under supervision. You can do a lot, but you will be limited. Kind of like currently in 2015 being a nurse practitioner who is able to do certain things and prescribe certain things under the supervision of a medical doctor, but not without that supervision. You will be limited. A lot of masters in psychology individuals end up doing a lot of psychological testing, and they're very well trained for that, but in order to do therapy at the master's level, you're going to want to head, if you're going to stop at the master's level, you're going to want probably a mental health counseling degree or a social work degree, clinical social work degree. As you look at schools, you're going to want to look at prestige versus machination. By that I just mean the money making. So there is some trade-off, and I'm not saying that all schools that have prestige are not going to be mechanical, as in get you in and out. I went to Florida State, and I believe it had prestige, but also some machination. So what I would like, if I were in your position, if I had it to do over again, I would want to make sure that I was getting some personal attention, some skills training from people that care about counseling and that care about training people well. Too often I think the counselors and the people that train counselors do not necessarily care. And you really want to feel that out. What is the attitude? What is the, dare I say, aura of the program that you're looking at for a master's program to become a counselor? I think it has a lot to do with the type of counselor that it produces. Finally, I've talked to some of you about this: cost, scholarships, assistantships. Of course there's a cost, and I talked about in-state versus out-of-state. When we talk about cost, this is a huge deal. Some of you have no money. You might want to join the military and learn from them. You might want to get a student loan. You might want to go to school part-time and work the way through. I want you to know sort of, what you're getting into. The cost is not as much as medical school. It's not huge, but it's not something to ignore. The cost can be high, and you might think, how will I pay for things? And in undergrad, we had a lot of these things called scholarships that were possible, and that would pay for your school. There are, of course, scholarships for graduate school, and even these things called fellowships, and you want to look into those things, because some of those may provide some prestige as well that will help you market yourself in the future. But I'd say this last one is something that you may not be familiar with: assistantships, and these can be teaching or research assistantships, TAs or RAs. You might help grade, you might help a professor do research, you might actually be just teaching a course on your own. You'll be an instructor, getting instructor experience as a teaching assistant, but with your own class. Depends on your level of experience. Normally they don't give you your own class at the master's level. They want to give, of course, the further along you are in a program, especially master's level second year on to a PhD, they're more likely to give money and opportunities to the people that are further along. Now, if they don't like you, they will start saying things like, you've kind of used up your opportunities, we want to give this opportunity to somebody else. So there may be sort of a, not a time limitation, but sort of a, you've used up all your assistantship money. Now when I say assistantship money, let me explain. You will be doing a job for a university and getting paid for it. You will be getting paid in two ways. You will be getting paid sort of an hourly wage. You'll probably see it as more like a salary. It will be horrible money. Horrible in terms of how much you're paying and how much work you're doing, and you'll be getting paid, more than minimum wage, but not a ton more. You'll be working approximately 10 to 20 hours per week. It's normally in 10-hour segments, and each 10-hour segment per week that you do for a semester is an assistantship. You might have 2 assistantships, or 3 even. Or you might have an assistantship that covers 20 hours or more. That is more rare because they always want to balance, and you want to keep in mind that you're balancing not just your own life with school, but your own life with a possible other job you might have, with school, with this assistantship, which is a job. Now, you might be able to get a better job, a job that pays more outside of the school system, outside of the university system. But this doesn't just pay money. It often, if not always, comes with a tuition waiver. Now, what that means is that you pay the fees, and you're allowed to take 9 credits, maybe 12, depends on the department you're in, how much money they have, how prestigious they are. they will allow you to have 9 to 12 to 15, probably 9 to 12 on average credits for free. You will pay the fees associated with those credits almost always, and you need to realize that is often going to end up being a lot of money. So pay attention to that. Assistantships are not always the way to go, but they are a way that you can stay on campus, get involved, show your professors that you know how to work, that you know how to work hard, build that relationship with them, learn a lot, and you don't have to be in two places at once, leaving school where you're learning to go to a job elsewhere. You can sort of combine the two as a teaching assistant or a research assistant. Again, where you're going to get a tuition waiver, this can be worth lots and lots of money. We're talking, a semester's tuition. Normally, normally these tend to continue, and you want to do a good job, of course, so that they do continue, so that they say, oh, you're a great instructor in this course, you're going to remain a teaching assistant, or you're great at helping with research, we're going to keep you helping with research. And hopefully, you always want to ask about this. Side note, you want to ask about getting your own authorship as you help with research. Can you be a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth author? You want credit for the work you do. Even if they're paying you, you should be given credit for the work you do if it is a scholarly work. So this is a major thing that I was unaware of. You should be aware, and when you are learning about a program, master's or PhD, you need to ask them about their funding opportunities. And when we talk about funding opportunities, when I hear that word now, I know what you mean. You are asking me about assistantships. Do we have the money to give you work to do? And many schools use this. Why do they do it? Well, I can pay you to teach a course as a master's student or a PhD student much cheaper than I can pay even an adjunct faculty, or especially a full-time faculty. If I get a grad student to do it, I'm going to be paying a tenth of the cost at least. Something much cheaper. This is how a lot of universities stay afloat, how a lot of universities really make up a lot of income. So you are useful to them. You need to realize that. You need to maintain that usefulness. If you think that PhD is a goal that is appropriate for you, you may want to go into a program that is PhD only. Okay, and there are many programs that you just start after undergrad. You go into a PhD program. You don't even get a master's along the way. It is aimed at being a PhD program. There are these. That's okay. There's no problem with that. I like the idea of getting sort of a stepping stone along the way. 2 years in, get a master's. I have that extra degree. I can stop if I want and use that degree, especially if I've got that master's in counseling, master's in social work. I can take that and stop if I want, or I can continue on into one of my PhD options. Okay, with PhD, we're dealing with less of a mechanical system. I believe PhDs are much more personalized. The faculty tend to really look at the candidates a lot more, and to really think about, do I want to work with this graduate student? Do I want to be on their dissertation committee someday? Are they, what kind of person are they? They're going to be investing a whole lot more time and energy in you personally in a PhD program. And of course, that's a generalization. That will not be every program. But with PhD, I'd really say that you're going to have a much more personalized experience, you definitely want to make sure you like the faculty, and definitely make sure that you have one, two, preferably all of the professors that you can work well with that will be teaching you out of their expertise something that you really want to know about, that you want to ride on their coattails, so to speak, and learn everything that they know, and then build off of that, build your own career and your own expertise as sort of an extra arm onto the body of knowledge that they've already created. You want to learn everything they know, and then sort of take your own little direction that allows you to individuate from them based on the experience and expertise that they have taught you. You will be known by the names that are on your dissertation committee, the people that taught you. You will be seen, we almost refer to it as a parenting system, in that, who was your chair is like saying, who was your father? And if your father was a person I like, I'm likely to hire you. If your father was a person I like, or in this case your dissertation chair or somebody on your committee, if they were a person I know, that name that is behind you is going to write your letters of reference. They are going to stand behind you and say, and essentially when you get your PhD, these people, well, of course you're going to have courses, but at the end of it you do your dissertation showing, here is the wealth of my knowledge, here's everything I know. This committee measures you, evaluates you, and says, yes, we agree you should now be a PhD. You should now be given the title doctor. Not medical doctor, but doctor of philosophy is what they're called. And when they stand behind you to say that, they're putting their names on the line for you to a great degree. And you will have these certain names as you go out into the job market. And so you want to sort of pick, maybe you want a prestigious name on your committee someday. You want to have been taught by somebody famous, somebody really good, or somebody really inspiring, or somebody that covers a certain topic that you really want to study. Second bullet, commitment. The PhD process is a longer process, which means more of life can happen during this time. Let me say that again. Life can go sour. Stuff, bad stuff, good stuff, just life can happen. It will happen. It's going to happen during the master's too, or undergrad, or whatever, but maybe you get married, maybe you get divorced, maybe your dog dies, maybe your parent dies. I'm not trying to say bad things will happen, but life will happen, and this is a longer process, so more is likely to happen. You need to be very committed to the PhD process. It is not easy. It is not cheap. It is a marathon. The PhD, in my opinion, is not about you being intelligent. It's not about you being smart. It is not about you being able to pass tests. It is about endurance, resilience, and commitment. Are you committed to jumping through all the hoops that your committee members say are important hoops to jump through, even if you don't agree? And will you do that with a smile? It is not about taking a test. Many master's programs do end in some sort of test instead of a theory paper or some sort of treatise. PhD ends in a dissertation which is graded somewhat subjectively by human beings who may not remember what it was like to be in your position. You need to be committed to this process. Now, it's okay to stop if life gets in the way and you decide you don't want to do it anymore. But I want to tell you now, there are a lot of people who do not finish their PhDs. If you want to do it, if you want to invest that time, money, life, think about it. Be committed and go for it. Okay, the cost, again, can be defrayed by assistantships, but it will be cost over a longer period of time. You're also going to deal with the more, I said personalization, you're going to deal with more interpersonal dynamics, which understand that you are entering, I think once you enter the master's, but especially the PhD, you're almost reaching from the student side over into, you're becoming an instructor, an assistant. You're almost becoming sort of a pseudo faculty member, and you're seeing, and you'll be influenced more by the politics of the system within which you are actually working. Now this is tough because you're in the middle. You are not fully faculty, but you are also not fully student anymore. You will be treated and expected to act as both on occasion. And please know that your political savvy, how much people like you, will alter how many assistantships you get. If somebody doesn't like you, they will not put you on their grant. If somebody likes you, they are likely to put you on their grant, or they're likely to give you an assistantship. Politics matter. This is not something that is very well, in my opinion, not very well, what is the word? We don't necessarily, it's not watched closely by fair hiring practices. This is a lot of, does the professor like you? There is a lot of subjectivity in who gets hired, a lot of personal opinion and preferential treatment, favoritism. This can really affect the cost. You need to learn to be a political person. It's very unfortunate, but it is part of real life, and you need to realize that costs being defrayed by assistantships and opportunities that you may get, like being on a grant, being on a program evaluation project, being involved in something a professor is doing, a lot of that's going to be intermixed with how much they like you. In other words, you need to be political. You need to know how to rub shoulders. You need to know how to say the right things. You need to know how to be friendly. You need to know how to keep your mouth shut at the right times. You need to grease the wheels, so to speak. PhD options, of course, as we look at the master's options we talked about, say you got a master's in mental health counseling, or a master's in social work, or a master's in psychology. There are some sort of regular courses that you could think those would lead to. Master's in counseling might sort of most likely lead to a counseling psychology PhD. And of course, this is a lot of training, and sort of like a medical doctor, you're going to have an internship at the end. You have an internship at the master's level as well normally, but this is sort of a longer, more intensive matching process, somewhat akin to what medical students do as they match for residencies at the end of medical school. So a master's in counseling may lead to a counseling psychology PhD. It can help you get into that sort of program, and that would be sort of the most direct alignment with sort of the attitude of masters in counseling in my opinion, leads to sort of the same sort of attitude that's behind counseling psychology. Whereas the attitude behind clinical social work will lead to a PhD in social work. I'll be clear about my own opinion and experience. I do not see a lot of people who go past the master's in social work because they need it. I do see more people go from the master's in counseling wanting to get that PhD in counseling psychology or something else. And I want you to realize you are not stuck on that path. You don't have to stay within that sort of viewpoint of master's in counseling leads to counseling psychology PhD. It can lead to a clinical psych PhD. It can lead to what we call a PsyD program. It can set you up for almost any PhD. You can even switch, which I did. I switched from counseling, a master's in counseling, to the research, a PhD in a research field in educational psychology. But of course, you are trying to show that consistency, that look where I've invested my time, look what I want to be. I want to be a clinical psychologist. You are going to be most marketable to become a clinical psychologist if you have a master's in psychology. A PsyD, you can have a master's in, I think, pretty much psychology, mental health counseling, social work. All would be good for a PsyD. I'll talk about that a bit more. But I want you to see that they sort of do have these natural trends from a master's to some sort of PhD that sort of would logically follow that master's. Now, that doesn't mean you can't switch. You get in a good master's program, you can often switch. They just like seeing that you have, and it's all about learning transferable, translatable skills. Did you learn research skills in your, I don't know, sociology master's? Yeah, okay. Well, if you did, then you can switch to a PhD in psychology, perhaps, that is research intensive. So you do have options here. Let me tell you about a little more about these attitudes. A PhD in counseling psychology is very it's more of a balanced approach to training. Your training will be a mixture of, in all of these, it'll be a mixture of research training, so training you to know how to write and do and perform research, and also training in your skills for therapy, providing therapy. Now, a counseling psych PhD is likely to be maybe a 50-50 balance between the two. Okay? And it's normally at public institutions, as is the clinical psych degree, which can be public or private. But clinical psych is often more research-based, research-intensive. We're going to use more empirically based therapy. You're going to be more likely to be pushed more towards something, if it was currently, probably towards dialectical behavior therapy, part of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You're going to use whatever is popular and whatever is currently the most empirically sound. You're going to be pushed into those. You're going to have a lot of, in my opinion, rigidity and sort of here's the way to do therapy. It's going to be more of a structured atmosphere. of here is the way to do therapy. We're going to train you and train you and train you over and over again. It's like writing things on a chalkboard. We want you to learn it our way. And it's got a lot more rigidity in it, and because of that rigidity and because of the sort of underlying foundation of research on that field, I say clinical psych is more of a 60-40, if not a 70-30 research to therapy emphasis. Some of you may disagree. You're welcome to say so in comments. But this is my own experience and perception of the field. I apologize if I've upset anyone. But I'm not doing it on purpose. What I'm doing is trying to communicate my experience to help people plan. And if you have other experience, I'd love for you to share that. Our job is not to argue. Our job is to help prepare the way. Now, I did mention this thing called a PsyD. It is not a doctorate in in philosophy. It is not a PhD. It is a PsyD. And a PsyD is a doctorate in psychology. And that sounds really great. But it is a different attitude. It's going to be more like 60-40 therapy versus research, if not 70-30 therapy versus research. It's almost always more likely to be at a private institution, which means your cost is going to be pretty high. You may have, I don't know about assistantships, but you're likely, even working with assistantships, you're going to have a much higher base tuition at most of these places because they are private institutions rather than state and state funded. So, three main PhD options that I've mentioned: PsyD, PhD in clinical psych, PhD in counseling psych. I did not really emphasize or highlight the PhD in social work. That is a possibility, but if you get a PhD in social work, it's likely that you want more of a management sort of experience, administrative, something like that. And of course, there's PhDs in research fields. That's what I have: research in developmental psych, in cognitive psych, in social psych, experimental, on and on and on. So many types of psychology that are outside the realm of counseling and therapy that you can do. You get a PhD in them. You are not working your way towards counseling. You're working your way towards being some sort of professor or consultant or program evaluator, some sort of person that is an expert in a field, that writes about it, that probably publishes or perishes. When we say that, we mean you write articles and get them published by reputable journals, or you probably don't keep your job for a long time. Now, you could get hired by a community college or the rare university that is more of a teaching-oriented university. These are more likely to be private, but not always. But if it is a teaching-focused university, you do not have to publish or perish necessarily, but they do want that prestige. There is prestige that comes with writing scholarly articles in reputable journals. So, we've talked about some of the options. I hope you've taken some notes, because I certainly haven't written it here for you. The PhD is great, but let me tell you once again, sometimes it's nice just to get a master's and do what you want to do. You do not have to get a PhD in anything to do counseling. You might get paid more, you might get more prestige, but you're going to spend at least 3 more years of your life getting that PhD on top of your master's, if not 5 to 7 to 8 to 10. Life tends to happen. It slows you down. Kids happen. All sorts of things happen. And just want you to keep that in mind. The PhD is nice. You get to be called doctor. I encourage you, all of you, to listen to me. I am a doctor. I'm a PhD. I'm proud of it. Many of you will be very proud of your PhDs. Many of you will not like what I'm about to say. PhD is a degree. It is nice. You are not God. Neither is a medical doctor. Nobody is God. You're not better than other people. A car mechanic is the guy that fixes your car. Without it, you would not get to work. You need to remember to always stay humble, respect those around you. Yes, you know a lot. Yes, you worked very hard for something that most people will never understand. Do not shove it in their face. We need to remain human and humble. Now, it's good to be proud of what you've accomplished. And a PhD is an accomplishment. It doesn't mean you're better. It doesn't mean you're smarter even. But it does mean that you ran a marathon, so to speak. You jumped through all these hoops. You wrote a paper and rewrote it 1,000 times and then rewrote it again. Even though they liked it and told you to do it the other way, and then they changed their mind. The PhD is a frustrating process. I think it's more of a test of character and endurance than an actual test of expertise. But it definitely tests both at once. Okay. My job is not to scare you off from the PhD. My job is to prepare you for what you are considering so that you know the path, a little bit about it. Careers. You want to be a researcher? You can do that with a master's. Can't do it very well with an undergrad. Want to be a researcher? Do it with a master's. Do it and get paid more as a faculty member at a bigger university with a PhD. Get more opportunities with a PhD, probably more funding opportunities, more money. Become a researcher. You're likely to have to teach as well, but you will not be trained to teach normally. Most of your life will be about getting a paper written, published, and out. And this means collecting data, having always having something going, and always hoping that what you write is important and gets published. This will be your life for a long time, being a researcher. That's what you're getting into. It can be fun. I love it. But it is a hard life. I will say that. I respect greatly the people that do this. If you become a researcher, you want to definitely do that at a university that is going to help you. They're going to give you a research assistant. They're going to give you funding to run an experiment, whatever it is that you want to do. They are going to make that actually possible so that they don't set you up to fail. If you want to work in mental health, again, you can do that with a master's degree. You can do therapy with a master's degree. Social work, master's degree. Now, I haven't really mentioned this, but you can work in the medical field and still provide therapeutic services. You can be a psychiatric nurse or a psychiatrist. Okay, a medical doctor. You will need med school to do that. You will need nursing school, normally a nurse practitioner degree, with a specialization in psychiatric nursing. And you can provide psychiatric, which are psychological services based on medicine, in this area. Psychiatric nurses are more likely to do therapy alongside prescribing medicine, like for your depression, anxiety, bipolar, borderline, dissociative identity disorder, whatever it is you have. these people are going to give you the medicine. Psychiatric nurse is more likely to give you therapy a little bit. Psychiatrist is less likely because of what insurance pays for. They're not neither of these people, but especially a psychiatrist is less likely to get paid for the time, and thus they're not going to spend the time asking you a lot about what the root causes of your depression are. They're not going to be doing a lot of therapy and counseling. They're going to be managing your medicine. First visit with them is going to be about an hour and a half. From then on, it'll be about 15 minutes. If you like that, if you want to be a doctor and manage people's mental illnesses with medicine, this is the way to go. If you want to spend less time in school and get less prestige, this is a way to go that's not as intensive and that you might be able to get to do a little more therapy. Now, I'm not an expert on these two, but my father is a psychiatrist, was a psychiatrist. I did grow up around these people. I've seen psychiatric nurses. I've seen psychiatrists. These people do a great job. Unfortunately, due to managed care, HMOs, a psychiatrist no longer provides the therapy in combination with the medicine. Unfortunately, we have a break between those two people. We go to a psychologist, a counselor, a social worker for our therapy, and then we go to somebody else for our medicine. It in my opinion, works best if the two are the same person. You can't get that very easily these days, so what you'd like to do, and think about this from the service side, if you were to become a medical doctor, or if you were to become a mental health practitioner, you might want to be in a clinic that is combined with a psychiatrist, so that you and the psychiatrist team up, so that they hear your opinion of what drug, what the major issues are, so that this medical doctor, this psychiatrist, who is extremely well trained in the chemistry of things, gets your opinion on what is really going on. And so you two are working together. The therapy and the medicine, in my opinion, should be combined. Insurance, unfortunately, sort of pushes them apart. There are other options which I didn't really talk about with the PhD, partly because they're different. They can be master's or PhD. You can get a master's in school counseling. This is sort of like what you remember from your own high school. Maybe you had a guidance counselor. And when I was young, a guidance counselor really didn't do a whole lot. If you're listening to me, guidance counselor of old, I'm sorry, you were not very good. You didn't tell me a lot of the things I needed to know, but you also didn't do what guidance counselors, or what we call school counselors, do now with their master's degree. You did not provide therapy. These people are therapeutic individuals. And I'm going to go ahead and make I'm not going to make that correction just yet. Schools. Okay, so multiple options in schools. You can be a school counselor with a master's degree and be that guidance counselor who pays attention. You will be located in a school, normally one single school, and you will deal with students and sort of provide, from 8 to 3 or whatever school hours are. You'll provide, maybe some career, options too, but a lot of, what's going on with your family. Why did you act out in such and such class? Students in need, students with troubles, maybe some gifted students, all sorts of things like that. If you become that's a school counselor with a master's degree. To become a school psychologist, you will need a PhD, and these are often combined. Some of these programs are combined. You can get a PhD in school psych and counseling psych, or various mixes of these, even sports psychology, which is not mentioned here. But with school psychology, you're less likely to be based at one single school. You're more likely to work for a school system, a district, and go from school to school doing testing. Personality testing, testing for, less likely to do personality, more likely to test for autism, dyslexia, any sort of psychologically related needs for testing. And again, you're hired. You'll travel from school to school to do testing on different students that may need special IEPs, things like that. You can become a counseling psychologist, which I've mentioned. That would require either a master's for a master's in counseling or a PhD for a counseling psychologist. You can be a clinical psychologist. Getting a master's in clinical psychology, I've mentioned, is going to be more like a school psychologist, but you're going to be doing testing. You can interpret a lot of testing. You'll be trained well in assessment and testing of psychological tests and measurements. And then I mentioned a PsyD program, which is the equivalent of a PhD, just a different attitude towards the area. Okay, one thing I did not mention is, and there are also lots of things I did not mention, but sports psychology is, it's more of a performance psychology. So instead of therapy and instead of research, you're doing more of a skills and performance assessment, evaluation, and you normally work with, in sports psych, you work with a team. And you're basing a lot of your job on producing optimal performance. You may even use that sports psych degree to work with a tennis team, professional NBA team, soccer team, football team, or even the military. A lot of sports psych people have. I have emphasis in performance as well, but sports psych are especially attuned to performance issues and to helping you reach optimal motivation and performance. So in that way, it is, I'd say sports psych is sort of like educational psych in that it's research based, but it's more performance based. At the same time, it's more active in that way. So what to do? You won't know right off. You may know. Some of you may know. You're going to go with your gut. Your gut may lie to you, but that's the best you have. You're going to listen to people like me. You're going to listen to the people that comment. You're going to listen to your parents. You're going to learn as much as you can, but you're never going to know how life is going to play out, what the best decision could have been, what your alternative futures might entail. You're going to do your best. Go with your gut. Go with what feels right. Go with what you think you need. It's okay to change. It's okay to succeed. It's okay to fail. You learn a lot through failing. You can just eventually change direction. Find what you really should be doing. Emphasize your priorities. Do not ever forget your families. Don't forget your families. Don't forget your own health. I didn't exercise for like 10 years. I didn't eat correctly for 10 years in grad school. It's 2 years in master's, 8 years in PhD. It was not a healthy lifestyle for me. You need to remember to take care of yourself. Emphasize your priorities. If you have a family, you need to realize that they come first. Make sure you do not let them fall through the cracks. I did mention getting that master's on your way to getting a PhD. You may think you want that PhD, you're 100% sure. If you can find a program that gives you a master's along the way, do it. Get that master's. That way if something comes up and you need to get out, at least you've got the master's to take with you. Take one step at a time, one semester at a time, 1 year at a time, while also planning 10 years ahead. Again, if you don't show that consistent direction towards what you want to do, you're going to be less marketable. You want to show people that you are committed to the degree, committed to the field, and also think about that you are amassing a library, so to speak, of knowledge. Your own expertise is constantly growing in certain fields. So if you switch from even different attitudes, but say you switch from sociology to psychology, yeah, there's some transfer of knowledge, some very similar concepts, but your expertise from sociology is not going to transfer as well to psychology. You want to always be growing the research articles you write, the things you're learning. You want them to be in one singular field so that you build up expertise in that field. They do not give you trophies for being well-rounded. When it comes to a PhD, they want you to have specific expertise. Okay? They do not want you to be the equivalent of a medical general practitioner or family doctor. They want you to be that heart surgeon who is an expert, not just in cognitive psych, but think of Eric Erickson, an expert not in cognitive psych, but in a specific area. He has made his mark in cognitive psych with deliberate practice theory. You want to find a field, then you want to find a sort of a subplot, a sub-concept, a specific thing in that field that you are an expert at, that you can write about, that people will care about. For me, it was medical education, specifically with relevance to social change, and I focused a lot on the healthcare reform movement being an impacting factor in career choice by medical students. I was able to weave in lots of my different past, but that's difficult to do. One thing I did not mention is that we have career psychologists. I did not mean to belittle them. They're extremely important, or they can be. It's all about what you do in the field, if you're innovative or not. Be innovative. Pick a field. Do great and amazing things. You can be a counseling psychologist, and you can help people find what they should be doing. You will need a PhD for a counseling psych degree. Be willing to change. At the same time, be stubborn. So, there were times during my PhD when I wanted to quit, when I hated professors, when I hated my life, when I was unhealthy, when I was going through a marriage, when I was going through a divorce. Life happens. It will happen to you. You need to think really honestly with yourself about being willing to change, and also being really stubborn and saying, no, I will stick this out. A lot of it will depend on how stubborn you are, but also on how much you have invested. And always looking at the situation, again, emphasizing those priorities. What do you need to do, not just for you? For me, it was different. I was the only one involved, especially after the divorce, right? If the PhD is causing your marriage to fail, if the PhD is causing your children not to get the attention they need, you really need to reconsider what you're doing. You really need to consider not being stubborn. In the end, there is no right answer. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not a determinist. I'm not a fatalistic person. I am not a person that says you have a destiny. I'm a person that says, you know what? A lot of us work hard. A lot of us are really intelligent. I could have gone into any field, and I think if I'd worked hard enough, I could have been good at it. There are some special gifts that we're given. I believe one of my special gifts is counseling people, helping people. I don't do that as a career. So you may want to always think about what special gifts you have, whether you want to use those special gifts for a career, whether that would ruin the joy you have in it. Think about what you want to get paid for, how much you want to enjoy it, but also, can you go home and leave it behind you? There is no right answer. You will figure it out. You need to be willing to be flexible, to be patient. You are going to be working for someone, most likely. And you will figure it out. There is no right answer. Always seek wisdom from your value system, your belief system, from wise people in your life, from family, from understanding your priorities, and go from there. Take it one step at a time. Be wise, be diligent, hold fast, but be willing to consider your options. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach me. At joelbgoodin@gmail.com. You can reach me. I'll be glad to answer questions. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it has not scared you. My goal is simply to give you a little bit of the story of my pathway to graduate school, thinking about all my options, and it can be a strange road. It can be filled with heartache and joy. You want to think about where you want to end up, but you also want to think about the life you want to live while you're doing it. It will delay a lot of things. It can, especially the PhD. So think about what you want to do in your life, how long you want to be in school. And feel free to follow up with me, and feel free to question what I've said on here. There will be other people with different perspectives, and I respect those other perspectives. I hope you do too. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.